I'm sorry about that.
Where are you? I can't see your beautiful face anymore. Are you not on video?
No, I'm going to be. Absolutely. Okay. You're going to see me. Just wait 1 second here.
Well, without your face on there, I lose a lot of viewers.
Okay. Well, I'll take your word for it on that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Encounters USA with author Matthew Hines. If you're looking for alien incidents, Bigfoot brouhahas, or dogman dealings, we have the podcast interviews, field research, and field interviews you're gonna love. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and check us out on Patreon. Now, on with the show. Kerry Cassidy will join us 30 minutes into the program. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Encounters USA. Today I have an amazing guest, and possibly I will have two amazing guests. We're just waiting for Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot to basically chime in on Skype. Right now I have Ron Morehead, the legend, the legendary Bigfoot researcher, and we're going to just begin the discussion by talking about some issues that have to do with Bigfoot. Now, to introduce Ron, I just want to make sure that I have his biography and his works in order. Ron was featured most recently in the David Paulides movie, Missing 411, The Hunters. And in that, he was featured talking about the Sierra Camp. And that led to his I almost said cassettes, Bigfoot Sounds. Ron is also the author of Voices in the Wilderness, about that experience, and he's also the author of Quantum Bigfoot, which today we're going to be talking about. So first of all, Ron Morehead, welcome back to Encounters USA.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate you asking me back.
Yeah, well, this is your third, I think, visit here, and you've actually got a frequent flyer mileage thing going with us, so it is good to have you back. And of guests that we could have on the show, Ron, you are always one of the best because of your experiences actually with Bigfoot. And Ron, we're going to be talking today about you're basically taking a new tack in your approach to Bigfoot, and we're going to be talking about that as it deals with Quantum Bigfoot, but we're also going to be talking about that as it deals with the subject of UFOs, which is why I wanted Kerry Cassidy here to talk about what's going on in the UFO community. So first of all, Ron, can you just give us a little background on I'm sure most people are up to speed on your experiences at the Sierra Camp. If people following this podcast would know, and if not, then look at some of Ron's previous interviews. But what inspired you to go the quantum route?
One of the enigmas that were associated with these beings that we were dealing with up there, they're very elusive. They're very, very smart. What we were dealing with in the Sierra Camp, there was just one step ahead of every trick we tried to trick them, to get a picture or something like that. And they're not just an animal in the woods. And there's a lot of things happened up there that we didn't talk about for a long time. So there was always kind of a puzzle to me. And, of course, Al Berry, the investigative reporter that went in there to do the study on them, he said, stay with science, whatever you do. He had a master's degree in science, but that was classical science. And so we just stayed out of inside the box, I should say, for a long time. And I don't know, for years I still had to think about this because I was thinking about probably 2010, maybe 2009, something like that. Yeah, a long time ago. Anyway, I mentioned this to actually Jeff Melder one time. What do you think about the quantum physics being involved in this? And he says he can't talk to me about quantum physics. So, of course, I know Jeff pretty well. We roomed together over in Russia and Siberia, and it just I understand his issue because he's in that discipline of classical science, which so many people do all their research like that. Well, I had to get a little bit beyond because I found that classical science is just not the answer to everything. It's based on material, physical things and measurable and predictable things, and that's just not the way things are. When you get into quantum physics, you realize the math that Einstein, that Bohr, that Schrodinger, these guys came up with years ago, 100 years ago. It's how it kind of explains and at least gets you to help you understand how things really work in the universe, from the macro world to the micro world. So we're all involved in that, including Bigfoot. Right. So the lights, the strange sounds that we could not identify, and I don't mean like we're talking now. I don't mean just the vocalizations that we recorded, but other sounds. They all had a puzzle to them. And last time I saw something really strange was 2016 when my Kerry and I were up at our camp, and we were sitting there in our tent just after it started getting dark, and we seen this tube of light string by our tent. Slowly, just working its way through the trees. And I mentioned this before, I think, when I was on your program, but that is just a huge bump. What do you do with something like that? How do you explain it? It's definitely paranormal, something intelligent and controlled, yet it's something we don't do. And you're 8,000 feet above sea level in the mountains, Sierra Nevada mountains. You're 8 miles into the wilderness, a very imposing area to get to. And you're up there, and you know there's nobody else around, and that stuff happens. Well, the answer to that has got to be solved somehow, or at least understood, and that's what I said in David's film, because we don't understand. It's a mystery, and it's just, we need to understand it. I don't know if you'll ever solve quantum physics totally, because it's hard to get your head around how things can exist that you don't see, but they definitely exist.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that got me into quantum physics and started me on my second book.
All right. So, when you start to get into quantum physics, and this is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, but you start to get into some pretty, it's not only science, it's theoretical science. It's talking about probabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And do you feel that you kind of might lose people when you start talking about that? Like, why do you think Dr. Meldrum didn't want to discuss it at all? Is it because he's pigeonholed into...
Well, he can't discuss it. I don't think he can keep his credibility within the academic community.
Okay.
He probably suffers from that a little bit, or at least Grover Krantz did. He lives right here, or used to live here in Sequim before he passed away. Mm-hmm. And he suffered quite a bit. He's a professor at the University of Washington. And they got to stay within their discipline, their science. And when you find out classical science doesn't really go everywhere there is to go, you want to get on that trail, and that's what I did. I got on that quantum trail, I should say. Yeah. And it seems to answer a lot of questions for me. It may answer questions for others too. I bring that up in the book, because I think quantum physics and spirituality are pretty much synonymous. And I get into that because that's really the core of my book, is how quantum physics relates to spirituality. So it really doesn't have to be a division with spirituality over here on one side, and we call religion and churches, and over here on the other side you got the scientific community saying it's dimensions, it's quantum physics. Well, there are dimensions. Mm-hmm. Religions will call that heaven. It's just things have been so twisted. I don't see them having to be separated. They can be together, and so the core of my books is trying to bring science and spirituality back together, because you find that Tesla, Einstein, a lot of those physicists studied the Veda, and it was just the Sanskrit text, and they knew there was more going on. And a lot of people want to believe in God, but they only want to believe in it when they're in trouble or on Sunday. Mm-hmm. It's more than that. There is a masterful mind behind all this, and I'm not religious, and I keep saying that over and over, but people want to call me religious because I quote scriptures, and I quote masters who have done things, and they've all done it, including Jesus Christ. I'm going to say that right out now. through the laws that God put in place, which is quantum physics. And it's the laws that work throughout the universe. And why I can't get, it doesn't bother me a bit to talk about it. So you asked, that was the question, I think. Does it bother me that I'm going to lose people? Well, if I lose people, I'm trying to, my best way I can in layman's terms, how to explain certain things in my programs when I give them. And I hope that people can follow it. I welcome criticism as long as they know what they're talking about. And that doesn't mean it has to be on my level, whatever level that is. It might be below them. I don't know, but I appreciate any input that I get. But I feel like I try to qualify everything with the science of quantum physics, everything I say. Mm-hmm. And it's about the unity that we are, and we all think we're separated, but we're not. Mm-hmm. And I think we're one energy. We just haven't learned how to be part of that collectiveness through our individuality, our ego that keeps us separated from other dimensions.
Okay. So you left me with a whole string of questions. Let's go back to you and Kerry were camping, and you saw like, I keep imagining a lightsaber. You also mentioned that in the 411 movie that the same thing went through your camp up there. So can we just go back to the Sierra camp for a second? Because our topic today is the association of UFOs and Bigfoot and how that relates to Ron's book, Quantum Bigfoot. So the first thing is you saw one of the firemen there saw a UFO and a Bigfoot was standing next to it, correct?
Not totally. It wasn't there at the Sierra camp. It was probably about 15 miles. They hunt. He's been hunting for about 15 years. Just a few miles away from the Sierra camp as a crow flies. And he had to get to me because he didn't know where we were at the Sierra camp, but he's been experiencing Bigfoot, him and his attorney hunting friend. And he also seen a UFO hovering over this mountain. I know the mountain is pretty well. And at the same time, he actually saw a Bigfoot. And that was pretty unique because I found out 20% of Bigfoot sightings are associated with UFOs, and that's kind of remarkable, I think. So
exactly.
Anyway, the fireman, very credible. He didn't want to tell me the whole story until he got to know me a little better, and I started trying to get him to open up. But he watched this deer run across this meadow he was hunting, and all of a sudden stopped on the other side and shot right back past him. He says, "Deers don't do that." So he looked across the meadow to see what was going on. Had to be a bear or something. He seen a Bigfoot. Wow. He's seen it step out in partial, and then this is where it gets strange. And he had a really hard time telling me this because he said he just seen one leg, and then all of a sudden it just totally materialized. He didn't use those words, but all of a sudden I could see him all of him, and he started walking away. Mm-hmm. And the real catcher here too creates another little problem is he said it was 4 foot wide in the shoulders, had to be huge entity. And I said, well, how big was the tree it was behind? He said, well, that's the strange part. The tree was only 2 foot around, and they couldn't see him until he came out. So that lends itself again to, can they do what the Native Americans say? Can they actually energize in trees and go through the plasma stage of fourth dimension light, and where you can see them? Some people call that cloaking. And get into the fifth stage where time as we perceive it doesn't exist. We live in the third dimension. So I kind of get into a lot of this stuff, and how they have that attribute is where I had to study too. What gives them all these abilities to do what people are reporting, and I've been interviewing people for a long time now, years and years and decades. Mm-hmm. And you just have to find it. After so many people say they saw them disappear, you have to see, well, can that really happen? How does that happen? Mm-hmm. And yeah, it can happen. Through quantum physics, you can understand it. You can understand how that could happen. But so many people, and I know them very well, researchers, they just write people off when they say that. They won't even listen to them anymore. They put them on the back burner, or throw them out under the bus, I should say. That's a better word for it. So I'm rambling on, Matthew, like I usually do. So
No, you're absolutely not. That brings up, we can go into two different forks in the road here. We can talk about the reasons that, like you said, 20% of UFO or Bigfoot sightings associate UFOs, or can't remember what that was, but it's really interesting that it's so compartmentalized. And what's the reason for that? Now, the reason, speaking of reasons, I wanted to bring Kerry Cassidy on here is because what you're talking about is, in the Bigfoot community, the preponderance of evidence is so demanding. You know, they've brought in blood, and they've brought in hair, and they've brought in just about everything you can from a Bigfoot, and still they're saying it doesn't exist. Well, the same thing with the UFOs. They've brought in all this physical evidence, and still the government says, two things in both cases. It doesn't exist, and there is no credible evidence. So that's where these two things really should be looked at together, and why you should be talking to the UFO people as well, because there are a lot of associations with Bigfoot and UFOs that we're going to be talking about. So that the similarity of two things that the government doesn't want people to know about or think about. Just very quickly, why wouldn't the government want people to know about Bigfoot, do you think?
Well, because I think they are a hybrid from alien messing around with the genomes. Because
there's a quantum element. Because there's a
quantum element.
Okay.
They understand something that possibly we could understand if we could just get out of our oneness that we think, or get away from our ego that we have.
Okay.
And that's coupling with universal consciousness that exists throughout the universe. And I think a lot of animals know how to do that. You know, they'll know how to fly south for the winter. They know how to dig a hole, and I know how to gather nuts. They know how to do this without any adult supervision sometimes. So we don't know things that we should be knowing. We should be aware of a lot of things that I think that's where telepathy comes in. That's where a lot of these unique paranormal, quote-unquote, abilities of some people come in. Clairvoyance, how do these things happen?
Yeah.
Darwinism, Darwin theory of natural selection just doesn't answer those questions. It answers how our bodies got through all this and how we evolved through eons of time into what we are now. It doesn't tell us how our consciousness evolved. It doesn't tell us how these attributes that some people seem to be able to really get out there and do, how that works. So I think classical science, Darwinism and Newtonian physics needs to step up a plate. They need to step up to the plate, I should say, and take a hit at this thing and see why, if that doesn't solve a lot of the questions that are out there that these people are experiencing all the time. So more and more people are coming over to the camp that I ascribe to, which is the quantum physics as being a possible answer to this. But I want to back up and say one more thing right here, right quick, is they are not all the same. Aliens from eons ago have been visiting this planet. I think they've messed with the genome of a lot of different animals, a lot of different primates. They've done a lot of things. Why? Because I think they want their species to continue here on this jewel of a planet called Earth. It is a jewel of a planet. You look at all the other planets, they're not what we are. I think they want a piece of this. They want a piece of our density, our 3D density. So they're getting their genome implanted in different entities. And that's why I think all these Bigfoot beings could be totally different, because some are benevolent and some are malevolent. Some want to hurt you and some don't. And they all have, not all, but different ones have different agendas. And so I just caution people when I just had to type a guy this morning. He wants to know where to go to have a good Bigfoot encounter. He wants to bring him flowers or something. I said, you better be careful. You don't know what you're dealing with yet. I don't know what we're dealing with yet, but I got this theory because I've been studying this longer than most people, and I've been involved in it and talking to people all over the world, and especially here in the Northwest and in the Northern America, I should say. And it's just, I think the dots are coming together where there is an alien connection with these beings we call Bigfoot.
All right. Now I want to point one thing out. It's so funny that this has probably nothing to do with anything, that Grover Krantz was my neighbor at WSU. I came from Sequim to go to WSU, and then when I got there, it seems that he moved to Sequim, I guess just to get away from me. So interesting. I didn't know I was that unpopular. Anyway,
Grover, he never did ascribe to our sounds. He thought these things had to be just a Gigantopithecus. That's what a lot of science went to lean to, because there is evidence that those did exist. And of course, everybody thinks they went extinct, but he was thinking maybe they didn't go extinct. Like so many scientists out there, they want to grab a hold of that because there is physical proof that something gigantic like that did exist. Mm-hmm. And so therefore they can run with that one. Grover, I tried to talk to him years ago when I came up this way, and he didn't want to talk to us, me and Al Berry, because he just, I don't think he gave it, or maybe he was dying at that time because it was about the same time, so maybe he just didn't want to be seen. Didn't want to be seen. So Grover, he made it very clear, though, somebody should shoot one of these things and bring in a sample. And he thought if we was having encounters like that up there, we would have done just that, just for science. And no, that's not what you do. And that's not what we do anyway. And that was one thing we had to say to Al Berry, we're not going to shoot at one of these things unless our life is threatened. And so we didn't. Yeah. Not that you get to see them that often, because it's pretty rare that you even get a glimpse of them. Mm-hmm. And Al never did get a glimpse of one. He never did. And it's too bad. He wasn't up there nearly as much as we were, though.
Yeah. Well, the next time somebody asks you where's a good place to get a Bigfoot sighting, I'd say Port Angeles on Saturday night, but I don't know. All right.
Could be.
So here's what. This is the first podcast I've done with somebody in absentia, but Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, I interviewed her one time when I first started doing Encounters USA, and I asked her about Bigfoot and what's the connection with aliens, and she just immediately says, oh, Bigfoot's from this planet, and they come here and whatever. And I said, well, the problem is you can't just say that. And you can look up the podcast I did with her, and I can't remember what the exact wordage was, but the thing is, in the UFO community, you can basically say all kinds of things about, different species, encounters, etc., because it's really your integrity that's determines whether or not you're believed. And so in the UFO community, you can say all kinds of things that you could never, ever get away with in the Bigfoot community and ever be taken seriously. Do you agree there's that what do they say in the burden of evidence is really placed on the Bigfoot community even more than UFOs?
Well, I think it's downplayed a lot because UFOs now are kind of being accepted because of Commander Faber's film and what they're saying about it. And of course, like you had on your program one time, the Maury Island incident, there's a lot of information in there in 1947 when it all started, just before Roswell. Mm-hmm. UFOs exist. They're commonplace everywhere except the United States, and now they're becoming more and more commonplace here. I've been in South America, I've been in Canada, I've been all over, and people take them for granted. They see them quite regularly. Mm-hmm. And it's just our government has been hiding that for reasons, obviously because of the technology that's there, and we've back engineered a lot of the technology that we've probably gotten from these beings. What's really going on, we may know someday, but we don't know now. I'm a firm believer that UFOs exist, and somebody has to be flying those, so therefore aliens exist, and I know Bigfoot exists. So putting them together is what, like I say, 20% of the UFO sightings have Bigfoot with them. And some people say, they're just a plain old species that's here, and maybe some of them are, but they've been here for a long, long time, and some of them may be different. So I'm not saying that anybody's wrong. I'm just saying that maybe there could be something else too, and something else would be different genomes, different types of these beings out there. I believe that from the different attributes I've heard them from credible people that they saw these things doing, and That's coupled with my own experience and what I also have seen up there in the Sierras.
Okay.
So the David Paulides film, that rod that he showed going through the trees, exactly how I explained it to his filmer, and he was able to recreate it. So it really looks real, just like what we saw, her and I. And we watched it for several seconds, just going right through the tree line.
So here's another topic that we could totally get into, but there was a subject of the orbs. I was watching a thing about crop circles, and over in the Bitterroots, they've started to get these crop circles, and they've noticed these orbs. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about the Pine Ridge encounters and the orbs that appeared there. So going back to this divisiveness between, well, I guess we haven't really talked about the divisiveness, but you say that some people don't accept your theories, your ideas. The pure researchers don't accept. And how far does that go? Do you think that means that you are ostracized from a part of the community?
No, I don't think so, because what they can't deny is Dr. Kurland's year-long study of the sounds, the range these things have, and what sounds can do. We're finding more and more that sounds, if amplified high enough, can turn into light.
Right.
It just goes on and on with this quantum.
Okay, but sounds, Ron, are physical evidence, and you're talking about, and we haven't even talked about quantum physics yet, and if anybody doesn't understand it, believe me, you're going to be freaked out. But I mean, everybody accepts you for the Sierra sounds. It's the best physical evidence, some of the best ever. But when you get into your quantum Bigfoot, does that make people go, shall I say, woo?
I'm sure some people do. My reception at most of these conferences I speak at is very positive, and I sell a lot of books there, so I'm sure some people are swayed over to, maybe there is more to it. All I'm asking for, they have to be flesh and blood. I say that right off the bat. They poop, they vocalize, they procreate, they do things like we do. So they have to be flesh and blood. But all I ask is, could there be more about them that we need to understand?
Right.
Are they able to do things? And I know what we were dealing with in the Sierras there were able to do things that just didn't make sense in the classical sense of a word. So that's all I start off with that. And if I can get them to open their minds, that's the biggest thing. And once you get them to open their mind, if it's presented properly, and I say, like some of the, I quote Tesla, I quote Einstein, I quote these people who say that, Tesla said, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than it has in all its previous years of existence. And I said that out of memory. How about that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Better than I could do.
But that's what I think we're doing now. We're opening up, and a lot of people are opening up. And you say, have I been ostracized? Not to my face. I still get invited to speak at a lot of conferences, and I get filled up pretty good. So, and I get to be on your show. So who could ask for more than that? Exactly.
It doesn't get any better than this. Could be a Miller Lite commercial right here. All right. Well, Ron, you keep alluding to this idea that, and I heard it before, that Bigfoot is somehow associated with God. And I want to caution people right now. Belief in Bigfoot is belief in, it's not belief. It's accepting facts or not accepting them. There's no belief at all. And I really am kind of worried that maybe this Bigfoot thing is becoming almost a false god. So I don't want to go in that route. But I've heard a few people, especially Native Americans, associate Bigfoot with a higher being. So you're talking about Bigfoot being associated with God. Do you want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, I don't know where you heard that part of it, but what I think God, it depends on your interpretation of what God is. God, in my thoughts, is pure consciousness throughout the universe. It's just consciousness. It had to take consciousness to make all this stuff, or to make it happen, or to. It has to. Planck said that, and Planck in 1800 and something. He was the father of quantum mechanics. He said there's something has to be in charge of this, a consciousness. So something in that line. As far as Bigfoot being like a god, no.
Yeah.
He's a spiritual being like we are. We're spiritual beings. You know, our energy can't die, according to Stephen Hawkins, and we're just going to change forms when we leave this body. Well, the same thing would happen to them. And maybe, just maybe, if my theory is right, they can, some of them anyway, can actually create a energy frequency high enough to where their mass will turn into energy. You'll see them cloaked in the fourth dimension, a plasma type field, and that's before they go totally out of sight, out of our perception, into the fifth dimension, where they don't age like we do. And anyway, I'm just rambling on. That's my theory, and I'm stuck into it.
Okay, well, and that's fine. So let's just
something else.
Let's just throw all our dice on the table here. Then, so quantum theory is derives from what is called the light slit experiment. And I'm not going to do any visuals or graphics, but basically they shot one photon through one slit, and it hit a far wall. And what they found when you made two slits was that the photon was passing through both slits at the same time. So at the subatomic level, all possibilities happen at the same time. And I talk about this in my book, Deceptions of the Ages. I give a brief background in quantum mechanics. I think we might have Kerry here. Give a brief background in quantum physics. But so what you're saying, Ron, basically is Bigfoot can occupy what space he wants to occupy.
Third density, where we are. That's where we see them. That's when you see it physically. Mm-hmm. If they're able, and they have gotten this through possible alien intervention into the genome of a primate, I think they have advanced attributes. They are synced in with whatever it takes to get through and to get into other dimensions, which we will be someday too. But anyway, that's a lot of them could just be a relic hominid and have just evolved over eons. But just about every person I've ever talked to, when they see them face to face, they have a very human-like expression on their face. So I think they are a type of hybrid from alien intervention.
A hybrid from alien intervention. So aliens created them from something, and humans.
Well, from a primate and put the genome. They also have been known to abduct humans, messing with them. Who knows what all advanced technology is out there that we don't understand yet? And I think aliens probably do. You know, they're a step above what we are expressing now anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot can be going on that we just still have yet to learn.
You know, Ron, I'm going to stop this for a second. I've got Kerry on the line here. Kerry Cassidy joins the interview, already in progress.
Oops. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we're doing a simulcast again today. This one is with Matthew Hines and Ron Morehead. And Matthew, it's actually Matthew's interview, so I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce everybody. And I just wanted to get on here and let people know what's happening. So I'm putting this on the screen. Now, what I see on my screen at the moment on Skype, for some reason, what we're only seeing is Ron's face. We don't actually see you, Matthew, and I don't know why. Maybe I can fool with that later. But Matthew, go ahead if you want to introduce us, and hopefully we'll get your face on the screen at some point here.
Well, you got the two good-looking people on, so that's probably good enough. It doesn't matter that much. Yeah, so right now we are Encounters USA. If you're not familiar with this podcast, we do aliens, Bigfoot, and UFOs, and this is really kind of a historic podcast because this podcast is going to bring Kerry Cassidy and aliens together with the famous Ron Morehead and Bigfoot. So very briefly, let me just tell you, Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot have been interviewing whistleblowers from the government and the military about secret space programs, about UFOs, about abductions, and all kinds of things. She's been doing it longer than, as she says, anybody else has been doing it. And also we have Ron Morehead, who is famous for his recordings of the Bigfoot Sierra sounds. And Ron was also featured in David Paulides 411 Missing, The Hunters. So I'm sure most people that are listening to this podcast are familiar with our two guests. And I'd just like to welcome Kerry and Ron to Encounters USA.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Okay, thank you. I just want to correct something you said. I don't consider me doing this longer than anyone else by any stretch of the imagination. We started Project Camelot I started in 2005, and Bill Ryan joined me in 2006. So we're actually new kids on the block if you want to look back in the history of ufology and all the people that have been contributing to this sector for really probably 50 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, Well,
that's very humble of you, Kerry, but you have interviewed literally thousands of people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
So you are the high priestess of the paranormal interview. So, all right. And I don't know what that makes you, Ron, but we'll think of a title soon enough. All right, so let's jump into this. I want to just say that Ron and we had a scheduling conflict, so Kerry and her group is joining us just a little bit later. So Ron and I have been talking about a few issues. And Kerry, the thing that we're talking about most of all here is the issue of aliens and Bigfoot. So before we go any farther, do you have any comments or any thoughts before we continue into the discussion?
No, actually not at all, other than to say I'm not an expert on Bigfoot. And so it's great that Ron's here, and I'm happy to hear what he has to say. Okay.
Well, this is what we've kind of discussed so far, kind of a recap, and that is that Ron has written a book called Quantum Bigfoot. And the reason that he's written Quantum Bigfoot, and this is to put words in Ron's mouth, is because you cannot go out you can go find a giraffe, and you can go find a snail, and you can go find a butterfly of a certain species because you know where to look, and et cetera, but you can't find Bigfoot when you want them. And you can't find UFOs when you want them. And the government says neither of these two exist. And the government says there's no credible evidence that these two things exist. So what we're talking about is, Kerry, there's a little bit of a difference between the burden of proof on the UFO community and the Bigfoot community. And I'm going to start off, Kerry. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I hope you can, but the last time I interviewed you, we talked about this podcast I was starting, and you said, like off the cuff, that Bigfoot is from some planet. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember? Why did you say that? Why is Bigfoot from some planet? What planet?
Actually, I don't know what planet, okay. But I think it's just intuitively. I know that they're not from Earth. I know they're interdimensional. I know they come to Earth and they visit, and sometimes they stay here. And that's the information I have about them. Mm-hmm. Actually, offhand, I don't know the name of their planet.
Okay, but and then when you made that statement, I made the point that, well, I think science is going to ask for just a little bit more as far as evidence, and I think that kind of creates what we're talking about today: the divide between UFOs and the Bigfoot community. In the UFO community, I mean, you have your video evidence, et cetera, but you also have video evidence of Bigfoot. You have blood samples, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, you have probably more physical evidence of Bigfoot than UFOs. So why is there such a, and I'm asking both of you this, why is there such a heavy burden of proof for either of these?
Well, you want me to answer that first?
Sure.
Well, I think our government just downplays it. The media downplays it. There's big money in science, and a lot of it's grant money from our government, and they want certain answers. And when the scientific community says that was a weather balloon that crashed, it wasn't a UFO, well, people just seem to want to hang on to stuff like that because they don't want to admit that we're not the kings of the universe or something. We're all just here on this planet, and what Kerry said earlier about them being from another planet, some of them could be. I maintain, I said this earlier to Matthew, that I believe there's different types. There's been all kinds of different, I think, aliens in eons past been on this planet, and I think they've messed with the genome of different creatures, including humans and different primates. And they've also, I think, have an abduction program. There have been implants taken out of people that claim they were abducted. There's a lot going on that we don't see with our three-dimensional eyes. There are other dimensions, and I think that possibly the aliens have created some of these beings we call Bigfoot or Sasquatch that have attributes that we just haven't quite caught up to yet. Mm-hmm. They are interdimensional. At least what we were dealing with, I think, up there, now that I think about it in retrospect, were interdimensional. Sometimes you could hear them walking, you could hear them talking, but you couldn't see them. And never even dawned on us at the time. We thought at the time we were up there that we were just dealing with some kind of a unique wild ape that no one knows about. So we were fortunate, and we weren't. Anyway, that's my take on that. I think there's different types of them. So really, some may be from another planet, some might be hybrids from different alien intervention to genome of different type of beings here.
Mm-hmm. So then, Kerry, do you have anything to add to that? Why are they asking so much of the, obviously they have a lot of Bigfoot evidence. Why do you think the government is afraid of Bigfoot or UFOs?
Well, that's a very involved sort of question. Obviously, they don't want to lose control of the population. It's all about actually keeping people in the dark, and that is because they want to make sure that they stay in control. Okay. And information is power, and so they don't want humans to have too much information. So that's kind of what's going on. And on top of it, this is, it's a very complex playing field. So we are not just, the Earth is not just run by humans. It's also got various alien overlords that are involved and behind the scenes, behind the dark magicians, etc. Mm-hmm. As far as the burden of proof, it's often said that in a courtroom, if you actually had a court case for UFOs, and I'm sure that the case is true of Bigfoot or as Yeti, as I know of them. And they may be a little bit different races, if you want to call it that. I don't know. They may be all the same race and just have some different appearances. I don't think we know enough about them to know that answer, but I can say that if it was taken to court, that there is so much witness testimony, certainly of the UFO sector, that we would have won the court case a long time ago. Mm-hmm. The evidence is prolific. And of course, the military-industrial complex is very well aware of it. The whole idea is to maintain the secrecy. It also has to do with the technology, because the UFO side of things has to do with technology. Mm-hmm. As far as secrecy on Bigfoot, Bigfoot is not the only sort of what we think of as maybe an Earth-like creature or earthly creature that is being hidden. The Loch Ness Monster apparently is real, and there are other beings, other deep sea, if you want to call them monsters, giant squids, etc. The sea is largely unexplored. It in fact goes down extremely deeply, as well as, not to say nothing of inner Earth and the beings and creatures there. So, we're talking about a huge playing field, and the name of the game is hiding the truth from the public. If we find out who we are, who we're visited by, what kind of DNA we really have, which comes from off-world, and also learning about other species that come from off-world. And I would say Yeti is one of those species.
Okay.
So,
well, now, Kerry, you've really highlighted the problem for Ron. And the reason that you and Ron are on this podcast together is because I think that with Ron is talking about science. In the community that talks about Bigfoot, you have a lot of people that have seen Bigfoot are hunters. They're people who work in the woods. They are people who work for the government in the woods. And in most cases, they're not really technologically proficient. So what Ron is talking about is something that is almost technology for us now. In fact, it is when you start talking about entanglement theory. It is technology. So I think that Ron, with his quantum theory, is going to be more accepted in the UFO community than the Bigfoot community. What do you think about that, Kerry?
Okay, you think Ron is going to be more accepted in, you're saying, are you talking about?
Because
Bigfoot
UFO people it's a science background. A lot of people have a good background in science.
I'm sorry, are you trying to say that you think the Bigfoot or the Yeti story is more acceptable to the mainstream than ufology? I'm not sure what you're trying to say.
Okay. No, what I'm saying is that, Ron, in the Bigfoot community, there are people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who say that it's a primate. And Ron is saying, no, it's more than a primate. These things are associated with alien spacecraft. There's something more to them. We can't find them. They seem to be able to disappear at a whim. We can't get them on game cameras, and they just seem to be not match any natural phenomenon that we have. And so that puts them in the UFO community, because those things also have the same characteristics. So all I'm asking you is, in your opinion, do you think that his ideas are going to be more accepted in the UFO community than they might be in a very conservative primate Bigfoot community?
Hi. Okay, you broke off. I'm not sure if we're having trouble with the connection here, but you're saying you think that again.
I'll say it again.
The UFO community. Look, the UFO community has no problems with Yeti, as far as I know. Yetis and Bigfoot are considered part of the paranormal. UFO, it's a huge basket, right?
Okay.
And it involves beings of all kinds. Okay. Whether science, mainstream science, wants to classify Bigfoot as a primate, as you call it, that's their business. But they're always doing stupid stuff, in my view. Mm-hmm. Science is so behind the times, it's not even worth the time really talking about it, mainstream science, because they it's only alternative science and alternate science and investigative kind of scientists that really want to push the envelope, that are revealing the true nature of the world we live in. So ufology, it relies on science, real science, but they are unwilling to take a look at it, like zero-point energy, and certainly quantum physics is dovetailing now with the UFO. And that's a big bucket. Again, it involves artificial intelligence. And so once you get into artificial intelligence, then you're seeing that even Geordie Rose is talking about his D-Wave machines going into 5D. So already that's verging into what is basically science according to ufology. Mm-hmm. So I don't really see. It doesn't matter. I'm not sure, what the point is, but I don't see any strength.
Is there ever a point?
The world of so-called, old school science that. you might know of Lloyd Pye, who tried. He's passed on now, but he had this small skull, and he was trying to get a DNA readout on what kind of being it was and whether it had any human DNA. I believe someone might be continuing that quest, but the bottom line is that it was not human. And the longheads, you may be familiar with those that are in museums, especially down in South America, that Brian Forrester has a whole museum full of longheads. These are also alien beings that have not been, their DNA hasn't been demonstrated. It costs a lot of money to break down the DNA, supposedly, although it's probably incredibly cheap. But according to, the facade of science is that it costs a lot of money to get the genome of any given being. So all of this is to say that there is evidence, including the Nazca aliens, by the way, of beings from other planets, skeletons that have been found. We also have Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira have written a book all about how the Smithsonian and other organizations have hidden all the giant skeletons they've found all around Earth. So again, again and again, we have evidence of, so-called scientific evidence being hidden and many times destroyed even, but definitely maybe in the closets of the Illuminati, maybe in the under the Vatican, in the Vatican Library. This is where you would find the evidence.
Okay. All right. And Kerry, I am sorry that you didn't get the gist of the question. It's just that, Ron goes to these Bigfoot, and I should have prefaced it with that, is that Ron goes to these Bigfoot conventions, and he's got people like a Jeff Meldrum, a strict scientist, and a lot of people who, if they talk about anything that that the Bigfoot is not just a primate, he's Gigantolopithecus or whatever, then you have people kind of shying away. And in the UFO community, like you said, if he was to say that, then people would say, yeah, that's probably right. So that's really all I'm trying to get at. Ron, you want to throw anything into the mix?
I think, Brian Forrester, I've been with him a couple of times down there investigating the elongated skulls of the Pracus people, they call them. And I think there has been some mitochondrial DNA taken from that, and it shows that it was from Southeast Asia, actually Turkey and Syria area, pretty much there, the haplogroup. And you're right, to get a complete genome rundown on this thing is very expensive, but that's to get the nuclear DNA, which is the male counterpart. Therefore, a couple of geneticists have come right out and said, well, the mitochondrial DNA, which is the paternal side, is mostly human on the samples they've studied. But they can't identify the male counterpart, the nuclear DNA, which would attribute. And there's where Melba Ketchum, who is a DNA geneticist in Texas, got kicked out of the bandwagon because she said it's not in the gene bank, and that was out of 224 billion samples. So right about then is when she got kicked out of the academia circle completely and made fun of and everything else. But then you got the other geneticists who went up into the Himalayas and found what they thought at 17,000 feet in the snow. They took some eDNA out of that, and she came back with the same thing. So, there's evidence going on, but again, there's big money in science and finding the answer that the government wants, because most of these scientists get their funding from the government. And a guy named Shane Land has just written a book about that, and he's been in intelligence in the military, and he knows how that works. Where there's big money is where you're going to get the answer you want. And I go on about that, but I got off the subject too, probably because she sparked my little thought in my memory banks here when Kerry said that the elongated skulls in South America. That's been a couple different expeditions down there into the enigmas associated with these elongated skulls. And that's the thing, they weren't totally human, they were hybrids. They didn't have a sagittal suture in their head. They got two little pinholes in the back. I got an exact duplicate of one right here. And the Inca people thought they would elongate the skulls of their royalty, thinking they would get the same brain matter that the pre-Inca people had, which is the elongation. They got the elongation by cradle boarding, cranial deformation, they call it. But you get into, it didn't give them any more brain matter. It just made an empty head up there. It's a lot thicker. The pre-Inca people had thicker skulls, about 30% larger, and they had a single parietal, where we have two, one on each side of our head. So the enigmas associated with them are the megalithic structures down there, which technology today would not do what these things are, what this shows for several thousands of years ago. And I'm bringing now into my programs, when I speak at conferences, the UFO alien connection with Bigfoot, and how I think it all comes together.
So, Ron, can I ask?
I think it's been all kinds of aliens. Yeah, I'll roll on. So just butt in on me anytime you want to, Matthew.
I talked to Brian a couple of weeks ago, like a month ago, and as far as I understood it, he got the same. He was getting the same problems that Melba had, that they wouldn't tell him what exactly the DNA was. I know that they had found stuff from the Black Sea, but it just seemed to be the same problem that Melba was having. All right, so here is the question that I want to pose to both of you. The government has there's Bigfoot and there's UFOs. What do you I want to say what is the government afraid of, but let me put it like this. Next week I'm going to have Dr. Simeon Hine on here, and he's been dealing with crop circles. And it seems to be that what he has found and what they found at Skinwalker Ranch is that the world is freaking scary. And I think that George Knapp alluded to it when he said that the earth at Skinwalker Ranch is thin. And what do you say when the truth is just too scary? That the UFO truth, the Bigfoot truth, the reason they're trying to cover up is because it's just too scary.
Go
ahead, Ron.
You're cutting out again, Matthew. But yeah, well, I think Kerry said it best earlier. They don't want to lose control, and that's what a lot of it's all about. It's power and control. Every government in the world, I guess, has always been after that, because once you've got that, control the people, you got the power, and it's just the way systems are, and that's the way our system is too.
Okay. Well, when I get Doc,
well,
go ahead, Kerry.
Sorry. What I would say is also that you're saying it's too scary. If the world is too scary for humans, I'm assuming, is that what you mean? It's not too scary. The truth is the truth. Humans, the truth shall set you free, as they say. So I have to say that there's no such thing as too scary, because we have to deal with it. We're here. We're sensate beings, and we have to.
But if they tell you it's not even an issue, how do you deal with it?
Well, actually, when they say, like when George Knapp or somebody like that says it's too scary, what he's trying to really do is convince people that you don't want to know. In other words, it's a psyop. It's basically trying to convince you that, oh, you're not, you're a child. You can't know. Our military can know, but you are too young to know. You're too stupid to know. You don't deserve to know. And I don't go along with any of that. It's complete nonsense. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is we are all assuming you have a soul. You're an eternal soul, mm-hmm. and therefore you have a right to know all of the truth, and you can handle the truth. So that's just a fact. And I'm sorry if George Knapp wants to push an agenda that talks about people not being able to handle the truth, but actually that's not true.
Well, let me stop and save George Knapp from this. He said that, quoting, I think is an Irish proverb or something, that at Skinwalker Ranch, the earth is thin. And he wouldn't say anything more than that. And you just get the feeling that the truth is just frightening. And the truth is, as we've seen in 411 Missing, in our common lives, you can be walking down the street and you could be like abducted. You could be abducted from your house. There are aliens that or there are beings that the government has no way to protect you from. And what makes it worse is when they come for you, then the government turns around and attacks you. When the Phoenix Lights happened, the whole government turned around and denied it. So isn't that's even more scary?
I have to say it's not scary. I mean, it's reality. So yes, you want to say to your children, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you about the possibility that you could be abducted by greys or reptilians, and let you be vulnerable. Let them take you anyway. You're going to find out anyway that your parents didn't try to warn you. So don't you want to warn your children?" I mean, that's what it's, this is a cause that I fight for my entire life, is to wake people up. Your children are being taken. David Paulides 411, this is a fact. Humans are disappearing off the planet. They get taken on slave ships by the reptilians and sold to other beings. And the women get sold so they can basically be, hybrid baby makers. So, I mean, this is the reality. It's not about whether it's a scary story. I mean, you're going to tell your kid, sorry, I thought, it was a scary story, so I didn't care if the aliens came and killed you and took you off planet because they were hungry. I mean, seriously, what kind of discussion is that?
Well, all right.
I mean, I'm not, this is for the sake of the audience. I mean, Matthew, I know you understand, but, you're playing devil's advocate or whatever. But the reality is that if fear it keeps you from warning your children and protecting your children and protecting other human beings, there's something really wrong with you. And that's the fact. That's a fact. There's something wrong with the rest of humanity. They are in denial, okay? And telling them there's something to be afraid of. Well,
okay.
The only thing you should fear is fear itself.
Yeah, but okay. So
well,
here you're saying
Winston.
Oh, you want to say something, Ron?
No, I said that was well said, Winston Churchill. He said, fear is our enemy. I try to tell people in my presentations too. I said, try to not let fear control you, because it will. We have a problem with our brains that can confabulate things, and that's all done through what memories you have. And so if there's any holes in what you're seeing, it's easy for your brain to confabulate and fill in the blanks. So try not to let fear interfere with what the reality is. I think fear is definitely your enemy. And if you can get over that when you're around these creatures and possibly even around aliens, well, that might help you a lot in understanding things.
Okay.
I mean, I think that it's important to realize that, fear serves a purpose. What you need to do is then get over it and have courage, okay? So it's not that fear is useless. It can be a useful motivator to get you to realize there's something there you need to go into. You need to go into and investigate so that you understand, so that your children understand, so that other humans understand, and so that we can make a plan. The thing that I hate about the secrecy I don't hate the secret space program. I'm not against protecting the Earth from alien intervention. But what I don't like is the fact that they leave humans defenseless by lying. And so that they have no idea and they don't know how to protect themselves. And that means discarnate entities. It means, interdimensionals. There's all kinds of beings. Now, I don't think, by the way, that Yeti or Bigfoot has demonstrated any real aggressive tendencies, other than if they're attacked, perhaps they defend themselves. But I think Ron could address that, and I think that would be an interesting question. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, Ron, but
Sure.
I have to say that about all the stories I've heard about Yeti is not that they're attacking humans.
Okay, but before you answer that, because I do want to talk about Bigfoot's involvement with Missing 411. But before Ron answers that question, holy cow, I forgot. I completely forgot what I was going to say. Give me a second. It's about this fear factor. You say that the government is afraid of losing control, afraid of losing the technology for 0-point energy, et cetera, et cetera. But okay, so let's have an example.
They don't want to trade it with other countries. They're not afraid of losing it. They simply don't want to share. Okay, they want to own it. They want to control it. The controllers want to control everything.
Oh, okay, so that's it, and that might very well be. But I'm just posing the question: Are the people that are invoking kind of the fear, are the people that are saying there's nothing to fear, are these the ones that are actually afraid of something? And that's just the question that I'm kind of asking, because if you had a parent that somebody was coming into your house every night and beating the hell out of you or doing some unspeakable things to you, and your parent said, there's no person doing that to you, well, you would think that this person is obviously dysfunctional. But this person is our government, and nobody, and it seems like the government is able to direct the questions. It's able to direct the discussion, so that we never turn around and say, why won't, it's them? Why won't they protect us? So that's the last, the point I have to make about this fear thing, is that maybe the government is afraid of something. Like I said, that you finding out reality is just so terrible that people would just freak out.
It's nonsense. The government's not afraid of that. Okay. It's a whole conspiracy of secrecy, and it's demonstrated time and time again. And you need to watch more Camelot videos if you don't know about it. Okay.
Well, that's exactly my point. And you, Kerry, you wanted to talk about Missing 411. I do want to talk about Project Camelot, but okay, Ron, Kerry asked you, do you think that there is a malevolent aspect to Bigfoot?
There can be. Depends on which one you're dealing with. And I don't mean by this subspecies of that subspecies. I'm talking about a completely different genome. You've heard about the dogman. You've heard about different types of these things, especially at Skinwalker Ranch. Different things have happened, and I think there's definite component of alien intervention there. Let me back up 1 minute and say that fear is only fear because you don't have the knowledge of it. Knowledge will take away fear. So once you understand something, you don't fear it anymore. Unless there's some reason for it. I mean, there's a guy standing out there with a knife, and you start understanding, hey, that's a knife, he could stab me with that. Well, yeah, you could have fear, but again, knowledge will help you overcome that because you know what to do about it. And so, there. Well, actually, where'd I go? Where'd I go wrong?
that you're right, Ron, because I have heard, I attended a conference in Yelm. I don't think you were there. I assume you weren't. But there are Bigfoot or Yeti experts who are doing a very similar thing to you. In other words, going out into the forest, meeting with them, recording their sounds, and so on. And wonderful people, in case you haven't already met them. And this is in the Oregon, Washington area, actually, Washington. And so I was there this summer and talking to them and watching their presentations, excellent presentations. So what I want to say is, on top of that, I have heard that there is a Bigfoot similar creature that is not the same as Yeti, that is actually diabolical. And it does attack humans, but it is a different being altogether. And so I hope that people will, they will not give Yeti a bad name, but that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are different types. I've said that for quite a while now, and that depends on what the nuclear DNA would show. In other words, the male counterpart of whatever genome they're messing with. So they can, you get into Egyptian pictographs and all that stuff, what you see are half animal, half man. A lot of the things, Greek mythology goes all the way back into that. So this has been around for a long, long time. It's only the last few decades that our government and different people have just been making fun of it and putting like there's no merit to it. But you get into Native American lore and all this stuff, and it just points towards that direction that I'm headed right now, I think, and that's a UFO alien connection with Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right. So let's
Matthew.
Yeah.
Matthew, can I ask you a question because we joined late? My audience that's listening to this right now did not get a real introduction from Ron himself about himself, his work, the book that he wrote, and so on. So we take a short time for Ron to introduce himself a little more thoroughly and explain how many years he's worked on this subject and his background and so on, and maybe a little about why he wrote his book.
I can do that. I started this in 1971 when I was involved with a group of hunters deep in the Sierra Mountains of California, where it's a hunting camp. None of us were looking for Bigfoot, but we had a family of them come around our camp at night. Went out, came back with tape recorders. They came back again. This went on for several years. I'm hearing myself in the background now. There we go.
You're okay now.
Anyway, we ended up bringing an investigative reporter in via Ivan Sanderson and Peter Byrne. They both recommended Al Berry come in. He came in, recorded the sounds too. All of them they were looking for a hoax. They just couldn't think that something like this could happen to someone. Most anybody ever gets is a glimpse of one of these things. Aside from the Patterson film, they got lucky. But we were having multiple encounters, and we were recording their vocalizations. Al Berry had those vocalizations studied at the University of Wyoming for a year, and Professor Curlin came back with a paper on it and said that they were above, in, and beyond what humans can do. Their vocal mechanism is much stronger than ours. Their amplitude is huge because of their lung capacity. But we had that studied, so we got the tapes out of the way. There was no sign of manipulation, no sign of alteration of any kind in the tapes, the original tapes that Al took in. And then it wasn't until years later till we had a cryptolinguist retired from the Navy as a cryptolinguist who now teaches foreign languages, Missouri, Scott Nelson. And he got a hold of us, came out all the way out from Missouri to interview us because he thought he heard language, and that's what he did for all his life in the military, is transcribe unknown languages. And he came out, got the original tapes again, listened to them, and came back and he made the statement that these things have a complex language. What we were dealing with in Sierras and what we recorded have is a complex language. And it's just challenging in fact, we had another certified court interpreter in several languages, one of only 10 in California, qualified with her hearing ability, listen to him, and she challenges anyone on the face of this planet to make those sounds like that. And we were going all the way from throat singers to whatever, and then because it goes out of the human range, way out of the human range, it can go into infrasound and ultrasound, we believe. And anyway, that's my background. I've been doing this now for close to 50 years. I've been interviewed. A lot of people have been around the world. I've been into South America twice with Brian Forrester and a couple others, 2 different scientists on 2 different expeditions. Been into Nepal. I've been into Siberia. I spoke at the Darwin Museum in Moscow. I've just been studying this for a long time. What I wanted to see about the elongated skulls is the reports of Bigfoot in North America have a sagittal crest, conical head, and I wanted to see if any of that could relate. So sure enough, you got the Incas saying they warred with giants in Central America, then you've got the Central American Mayans and the Aztecs saying they warred with giants in the north. It took me up to the Lovelock Caves, where I've been there 4 times now, and where the Paiutes say they warred with giants, hairy giants, and then you've got so many things that happen that just kind of got this little crumb trail going all the way up into here. And you got Jim Vera, who we all know, written this book. I've seen him years ago, and he has so much information on giants and how the Smithsonian's hiding this stuff. And yeah, they do, because they want to keep you blind. They don't want to throw religion into a whirlwind. They don't want to throw economics into a whirlwind. So if we knew the secret of gravity and different things like that, I think it would destroy our economy. It's all about knowledge, and they want to keep the fear factor, I think, going with us, if that's what you want to call it. But again, when you have knowledge, your fear goes away. So it's just we don't know what we don't know. And that's my background a little bit. Kerry,
and can I just throw in here, Ron, that the best place to see Ron is David Paulides 411. The Hunters, there's a great segment. You're on there for like 15 minutes. I think, talking about the Sierra camp.
Well, that is the Sierra camp. That's the first one I've ever allowed to go in there to film where we go. Yeah. He doesn't reveal the location. I'm very pleased with that because I asked him not to. Yeah. I wouldn't say that's the best film of me. It's a 15-minute section in his 411 Missing Hunters, because I found out from David's map, and I've known David for years and years, and he showed me on a map where a lot of missing people, unaccounted for, mysteriously missing, all around between Yosemite and Tahoe, and that our camp is the hub of it all. So he wanted to alert me to that, because whether they turn up missing, I suppose if people don't come back, you never know that if they were bad or good or what happened, or if UFO abducted them or if a Bigfoot ate them. You don't know. If they come back and say, yeah, this one took the flower from me, well, then you know it's probably a good one. But so many people want to say they're all good and they're all benevolent. You know, they don't want to hurt anybody, and maybe that's true. But there's also got the Native American reports where they have enticed their women to come in because they want to crossbreed with them, which means they would have to have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and every other primate has 24. You just you try to put all these dots together. That's what I've been doing for 50 years now, since I encountered this family of them up there, and since I've interviewed so many people from all over the planet. Really, it's just really exciting to me, because I think we as humans are unique. I really think we are. Aliens are different, that's for sure. But for some reason, they're not taking us over. They might be doing it by becoming part of our environment through putting their species into different types of beings. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's a lot of human hybrids here. Well, if you really want to get into it, I think we're a hybrid, but we're a hybrid from a very special type of being. And I think we mentioned this earlier. What is God? Because I don't think God is consciousness itself, I think, throughout the universe. And consciousness is related to energy. We are all at our most minute level of being, our energy. We are energy, and energy can't die, according to Stephen Hawking. So that's what I get into with my book, The Quantum Bigfoot. I get into my first book was my chronicle, Voices in the Wilderness, and it is my 40 years of doing what I'm doing. And it gets into some of the South America trips, some of the Moscow trips, and different things like that. So those are all. I'm talking too much. Somebody interrupt me.
No. You never talk too much. And Ron, when I saw you on
RonMorehead.com, let me put the part in. RonMorehead.com is my website.
Yeah, when I saw you on that Paulides movie, I thought I was looking at Burt Reynolds. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Most people mistake me for Chuck Norris.
I was double. Not a karate man. Well, anyway, yeah, so Ron's the closest. Besides Kerry, Ron and Kerry are the closest thing to celebrities that I actually know, so it's pretty cool to have them both on the podcast at the same time. Well, Kerry, are you satisfied with Ron's introduction? Are your listeners and viewers happy?
I think that helps a lot. Now, I think the other thing people really would like to hear is some of the sounds. Do you have them recorded for the show, or do they need to go to your website to hear them?
I didn't send any to Matthew for this show. They're easy to find. I got a couple of them on my website.
Would you like me to replicate them?
If you want.
I'm kidding. You don't want that.
I thought you meant you played the copy that I've sent you.
Oh, no, I was going to do it by...
these are also available on CD. I have produced 2 CDs with my story and also Al Berry's story. He's an investigator we took in. That's narrated by Jonathan. Both about 40 minutes long. They have embedded sounds in them, CDs, obviously. So you'll hear the sounds in either one of these CDs. They can be obtained from my website. And it's a whole array of different... We record these things for years, so it's just... well done. I think Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek Next Generation, narrates the first one. I narrated the second one, and it's my story, and I wrote it and produced both of them. And so I've got 2 books and 2 CDs, and all available from my site.
Great.
So there.
Yeah, and I'll have links to all of Ron's stuff at the bottom of the description on my YouTube video. So, all right, Kerry, I've had Ron for now we're 20 minutes over what I told him that I would do. So are you good for a couple more minutes, Ron?
Yeah, sure. My Kerry is gone for the rest of the day, so I'm here by myself, just me and the dogs. So.
Yeah, Ron sent his wife off without him, so just to do this
took
podcast.
Off without me. I didn't send her off.
Okay. All right. So here is the question that I have for both of you. Now, Kerry, you alluded to this. You have Project Camelot, so you have a large following, and basically you can tailor-make the discussion of, what the UFO community is looking at. And I'm going to give you some examples. Let's see. I think in 2016, there was a big thing about an Antarctic civilization, right? I think in 2014, it was William Tompkins and the secret space program. Somewhere in the along the line, Corey Goode got interjected. And it just seems that who ordains these people to come forward and to get all this attention? Because this stuff kind of, it turns out to be, people say these things, but nobody comes along and says, oh yeah, what that guy was saying is exactly right. Who directs all this? Is it you?
I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you trying to say that I run ufology or something weird? No, of course not. I do my work and I interview whoever kind of comes my way, and or I get sort of an intuitive idea. Like lately, I'm trying to bring on all the witnesses of the Rendlesham incident that happened in the UK. Mm-hmm. And that was covered years ago, and it has been over the years. But suddenly, everyone's changing their story. They're all enemies of each other suddenly.
Really?
And I know my intervening, so I'm interested to find out why the government, again, they're going into disinfo certain stories. So right now, I'm sort of trailing and crafting those stories. So if you're asking me what am I doing, I can tell you. Why other people pursue other things, I've got no idea. It's their own, I'm sure they're motivated by whatever they're motivated by. The Antarctica story, by the way, has been in the background and dealt with on and off. I mean, Camelot dealt with a base in Antarctica, really close to the beginning of Camelot. We were notified by somebody and put out a whole sort of a secret document that was from someone who supposedly escaped from New Berlin, mm-hmm. the Nazi base down there. So, we've been dealing with it on and off all through the years. And this is the case with a lot of things. Sometimes they become what you might call cause celebs, or people get enthralled. Suddenly the audience is really interested in certain aspects. I can't really say, anything particular about that. I can say certain witnesses will stimulate a whole discussion around whatever they bring to the fore. In the case of William Tompkins, he did bring back to sort of people's awareness the invasion of Admiral Byrd into Antarctica and the role that the aliens play to some degree in that. The fact that we lost the battle against the aliens down there at that time, and so on. So he's a fascinating witness, and I interviewed him for over 3 hours. That's on my YouTube channel for those of you who don't know who William is. He's a Navy
But Kerry, do you agree that somebody is directing the discussion? Do you think that all these people that are so-called UFO insiders are not really somehow, they get information from the government because the government wants to put out this certain information, but these guys are just as much part of the cover-up as they claim not to be. Do you think that's going on?
Sure. It's the UFO and the paranormal secret things to do with portals, which has a lot to do with Skinwalker Ranch, etc., Satanism, etc. All of this is dealt with periodically, and sometimes they put out what you call a limited hangout, an individual who will cover certain things but not others, and steer people away from looking at certain things. They have their witnesses, let's say, but I have mine.
Okay.
So that's what I specialize in, is
is whistleblowers who defect from the government, who break their security oaths in some cases, like Bob. He's still part of an old boy network. He's passed on, but he was still part of the old boy network, so they kept him alive. But his child, one of his daughter died. I believe she supposedly committed suicide, if I recall the case. And, so whether that's true or whether she was 9 or 12 to do so, Clifford Stone is another whistleblower who came out and broke his oath and told, and his son died in a motorcycle accident, supposedly an accident. So again, you have to look at these and say, did their children actually die, or were they given payback by the Illuminati for breaking their oath?
Okay. Now, I think that, Ron, you're sitting there, and I think you want to jump in and say something, but I think that, again, this really highlights the fact that if you're in a UFO community, you can say a lot of different things and not have a lot of evidence to back it up, but you're in the Bigfoot community. I mean, you can show a picture of a Bigfoot, perfect picture, nothing wrong with it. It's a guy in a monkey suit, so, Ron, do you think that, again, that we're going back to that burden of proof issue, but obviously you have a lot of people in the UFO community. Do you agree they can pretty much say whatever they want and not have anything to back it up, whereas you have to have a lot of evidence to put something in one of your books?
I think anything needs substance if you're going to talk about it. Like, that's why I wrote the Quantum Bigfoot, is because it has a substance of science behind what went on, when the enigmas associated with what I was encountering up there. The other part of your question was what? I forgot. I'm sorry.
Well, it's just that same old question. The preponderance of evidence. These guys are having a whole discussion about Antarctic communities of aliens, et cetera, when there's no evidence, and you pull up a Bigfoot hair and you're going to get crucified.
Well, I just have to take issue with that, Matthew. I don't agree. There is evidence. You may not know about it, but it's certainly out there. Admiral Byrd, for that matter, wrote actually a couple books, from what I remember.
Well, okay.
And his whistleblower testimony talking about people that knew what they know. So, in other words, a witness testimony can convict a killer and send someone to jail. But when witness testimony comes forward with regard to UFOs or anything else, if the disinfo team of the government and their spy agencies, et cetera, want to turn that around and call it conspiracy theory, then they get away with that. Yeah. So all I'm saying is, get it right. Either humans can be actual witnesses of information, and they can actually, tell the truth, which we can, obviously. And of course, sometimes people lie. I don't think there's more liars talking about Bigfoot than there are liars talking about UFOs, for that matter. The bottom line is that evidence is still required, but what do you consider evidence? And the bottom line is also that when we're talking about going interdimensional through portals, etc., and humans are very materialistic, especially mainstream science. Mainstream science is a materialistic discipline. It only wants to see the evidence in front of them. They don't rely on the other senses that go way beyond the sixth senses. And yet, thank God, remote viewing has revealed that we have a lot more going on. And that's just a small portion of the huge amount of psychic abilities that humans have, that includes telepathy and so on. So right now, in scientific, so-called scientific and military circles, remote viewers are very used. They're used by governments to investigate all kinds of things, and have proven right time and time again. Proven right. There's evidence, okay? And there's even tangible evidence. But the fact of the matter is that they don't want to let in the rest of the spectrum of humans' abilities. So what are we really talking about when you say the burden of proof is on Yeti but not on UFOs? That's not true at all. In fact, the fact that we've been disinfo for all these years is all of the evidence of which it is so plentiful it's ridiculous. And you can see it with your own eyes, by the way. I've seen lots of UFOs, lots of things that cannot be explained, even by what our secret space programming has.
Uh-huh.
And beings, including reptilians and others, have been seen by humans and remarked upon and told in testimony, etc. And whistleblowers have risked their lives to tell the truth about what they know, having worked in these programs way above top secret for over 40 years, a number of them that I have brought forward. The fact of the matter is that we have brought forward evidence and the truth, but they don't want to look at it. So I don't think that you can take, and it's actually a stupid thing that you can try to do, is to compare Yeti evidence to UFO evidence. The evidence is whatever it is, and you've got to make up your own mind from there.
Right. And all I'm really suggesting, Kerry, is that based on the years and the media, etc., we're more willing to accept a story about a UFO than we are to hear some logger or hunter with some red man dripping down his cheek talking about seeing a Bigfoot over in yonder woods. So I think that's really what I'm saying, is that you have people, let's look at this string of people. Who was the guy from Colorado who was having these alien abductions, and then it turned out like he was having all these encounters, and then he was arrested for like child porn or something, and then there was the Corey Good thing, and there just seems to be all these characters that come along and are debunked, but so many people are just willing to willy-nilly just believe them. So that's my point, is that, number one, I think it's easier in the Bigfoot or the UFO community to be believed, and I think in the Bigfoot community they have to have physical evidence, and even if they have it, they're just discounted. And that's what happened to Mel Detection, et cetera.
Yeah, that's what happened with the Patterson film and all that. That's been studied, by the way, second only to the Kennedy assassination. It's been accredited as genuine. It was not a man in a monkey suit. Now, that's one piece of evidence. The evidence that we have with the sounds and things that went on up there is phenomenal. I mean, you got a professor, a bona fide professor, written hundreds of papers, over 200 in fact, and one of them was on our sounds and what he found, how they were not manipulated, that they were real, and that, anyway, he gave the whole presentation to UBC up in Canada, and they wrote a book and put his findings in the book, Man Like Monsters on Trial. And you got evidence like that, and yet you got other professors out here that just turn their head at it. They don't. They are, in the classical sense, scientists who have been trained in a discipline which won't let them out of their paradigm, and they've created that paradigm from the disciplinary box they've been put in. Newtonian physics, it is based on material and measurable and predictable. That's why quantum physics was found in over 100 years ago, is because it does not answer the questions of consciousness, of telepathic people. It doesn't answer it. Darwinism just answers the physical part of how man evolved on this planet. It doesn't give you the answers that you really need to find out about. And that's, who are we? What are we all about? How do some people have these different abilities that seem like they can move things with their mind, or they can do different things. And anyway, I think there's just more to it than just the physical being. These things none of us are just physical beings. I mean, we might appear that way in this form, but again, energy can't die. We're all going to just change forms one day. And what we go to after that, even Einstein wouldn't speculate. But and we got to get away from Newtonian physics as being the dominant thing that we all are governed by from grade school on. How come they're not teaching quantum physics or quantum mechanics even? Why don't they get into it and understand that there's more going on that you don't see with your three-dimensional eyes? If there are 11 different dimensions and these things somehow can move from the third dimension, I'm talking about Bigfoot now, and through the plasma field of the fourth dimension, which is light, and you'll see it. It depends on the temperature of it. It's where ghosts come from. That's where the stuff happens in the fourth dimension. On your way to the fifth, out of our perception, we only see within the light's frequency. If you see what the frequency of light is, you'll see how limited we really are compared to everything else that's going on. So I'm just trying to get people, when I talk to them, if you want evidence, look at what's out there. So many people just wonder, "Oh, I can't believe that," because they got a brain fart, put it that way. They just don't want to, but more and more people are coming around to it, and because more and more people are becoming wanting to be more aware of what's going on, and more people are seeing these things. UFOs are being spotted all the time now. Bigfoot's being more and more out there. It's all going to come to a head here before too long, I think, and I think we will be inundated, and we're being kind of acclimated now with the theaters and all the movie things that's going on to accepting foreign-looking things and all that. So when it does happen, we're not going to be very surprised.
Right. So, Kerry, you want to throw in anything on that?
Yeah, I think he's right, and I think that the bottom line is that for people that don't know about the evidence for UFOs and the secret space program, Rich Dolan has written, I think it's a 3-volume of super thick series documenting all the UFO sightings that he could come across, explaining them in detail, and of course, there are zillions of witnesses all around the planet, but they are not accepted in a courtroom. And in fact, in England, you can be thrown in jail and thrown in a mental hospital if you talk about meeting with aliens. But I don't think anyone's being thrown in jail for saying they talked to Bigfoot, although who knows, the day is young. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, people are being prosecuted for their beliefs and for their experiences, just telling the truth about what they experienced. And I think that's on both sides of the street, so to speak. So I think it's really important to do your own research, to do investigation, to understand that, people like Ron are out there, and they've done a lot of the legwork for you, and you can read his books and certainly see his evidence and come to your own conclusion. And there are other people, like I said, we're at the Young Festival. I'm sorry I don't have their names. I did invite them on the show. I have done other shows, by the way, on Bigfoot and Yeti myself on Camelot. So you can probably do a search on my YouTube channel because you're wondering who I talked to about that. And Ron, is it true that you're going to be speaking at this upcoming UFO Con, where I'm also speaking in February? Are you going to be there? I thought I saw somebody said your name. So.
I don't know. I just spoke last weekend here at a MUFON group. I've spoken 2 in Southern California MUFON groups, and I'm speaking at a conference here in Kingston, Washington on May 2nd. It's called A Step Beyond, bringing the UFO community into the Bigfoot community or vice versa. So we expect that to be packed out on the 2nd of May here at the Point Casino in Washington. The one, is that the one in the one you're talking about, Kerry? Is that the one in southwest Washington, Quinault?
No, I don't know where I heard it. I maybe I got the wrong impression. Maybe it's another Bigfoot person that's going to be speaking there. But I'm speaking at a conference at the end of February, sometime around the 20th, 21st. And it goes on for several days, and I think they do have a person involved with Bigfoot on that group. I thought it was you,
Oh, I wish it was.
Well, Kerry, I think the question is, Ron, would you like to speak at the conference?
Well, sure, but it's too late.
It's not my conference, so.
It's too late anyway.
When they hear, they'll invite him.
I've been booked into Georgia and way back east since early last year.
Wow.
Sure.
All right. Well, you guys, I just have a couple more questions, and then I think we're just about out of time. The whole topic today is Bigfoot, UFOs. What's the connection? And so I cited two incidents. Before you were here, Kerry, we talked about the Sierra Camp encounters. And then there's another encounter that happened, very well documented in 1973. Kerry, do you know much about the Pine Ridge encounters in Pennsylvania around Kecksburg?
I don't know if I do or not. Maybe
Okay.
I don't remember.
I know, because you've forgotten more than I know, so I know that.
No, I just don't know, but go ahead and talk about it.
Well, if you look it up, the Pine Ridge encounters, Pine Ridge runs, I think, from Pennsylvania to Indiana. It was featured in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The only thing is that Spielberg did not include Bigfoot in any of those encounters, but the fact is there's a number of encounters that happened there where there was a spaceship, a UFO sitting on the ground, and Bigfoot coming out of the spaceship. And there was one incident where there was a couple guys and I think their dad, and these Bigfoot started walking down the fence line right at them, coming from the UFO, and the father fired a couple shots. They said, "Let's get out of here," and they took off. And when they shot at them, the Bigfoot just kind of turned and started walking the other way. They didn't look like they'd even been hit, which brings you back to that Skinwalker Ranch story. So the Pine Ridge encounters happened over the course of weeks or months. So when you're looking for examples of evidence of Bigfoot connected to UFOs, I don't think there's a better example of that. So, Kerry, you haven't...
I think that George Lucas might have been onto something.
Well, that's my next point. If you guys hadn't piped in and said anything, is that this is 1973. In 1976 or 75, I don't know when they filmed that episode of The $6 Million Man, but you got Steve Austin fighting Bigfoot, and he's hanging out with Stephanie Powers and the rest of the aliens, who looks a lot like you, Kerry, except for you got blonde hair. But anyway, continuing on. And then in 1976, you've got Chewbacca. So there was obviously a media hush up of what happened there, but how does Spielberg and Lucas, get access to this information? Any comments on that?
I can
say that Hollywood, Spielberg has been read in for a very long time, and Lucas too. So whether they were read in when they first started, or whether they just got sort of recruited at some point is unclear. Yeah. I can say that Spielberg is way high in the food chain, as is what's called Bad Robot. I mean, there are certain players in Hollywood that are very deep into the story, mm-hmm. and I know that Lucas would be among them as well.
Okay, and they're both 33rd degree Freemasons. I'm sure they both hang out at that grove, the Bohemian Grove, and who knows what else is going on. All right, well, I'm just going to ask you guys, Ron, I didn't get a real satisfying answer. Bigfoot and missing 411, you think there might be something there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was there.
Do you think that these missing people might have something to do with maybe a hungry Bigfoot?
Well, I don't know. It's all speculation, so It doesn't really matter what I think. I think there probably are some bad ones out there, and that's because of what I've spoken of earlier, the different types of aliens that have been on this planet before, have messed around with the genomes of different type of primates and us. And so there's also good ones. I think probably we were dealing with good ones up there because we did not get eaten, even though we wasn't sure about that to start with. From the sounds that they were displaying was really aggressive, and I think they were trying to run us off, or they were just fighting over the food that we'd left out. Who knows? But I don't know about the 411 stuff, and David won't chime in on it. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what he thinks, but I'm not free to express that.
Okay.
Obviously, there has to be an answer to why these people turn up missing. It's not just turn up missing; it's the enigmas associated with where they were found, or if they were ever found, and how it happened. That's what he investigates. He doesn't investigate the ones that are simple, just somebody got found because a bear hit him or something. So as far as that goes, there's a lot of missing people between Lake Tahoe and Yosemite area, especially, between Lake Tahoe and Yosemite, and that's where our camp is between those two places. It still is, I guess. But when he showed me the map, he showed me of all the missing people that were unaccounted for, the mysterious ones, and showed me that our camp was the hub of it all. It kind of makes me wonder, because you don't know what the intent of whatever you're dealing with is until they come out and tell you, we're going to eat you or we're going to help you. You don't know. And again, if you go in the woods and don't ever come out, how do you know if it was a good one or a bad one, or how do you know what happened to you? How does anybody know if you got abducted or if you got eaten by a bear or if a Bigfoot was to grab you, the hungry one? That was the Paiutes had that legend going on. The hairy giants that they got at the Lovelock Cave and supposedly destroyed them were cannibalistic. And it's been told in Native American lore that these things were cannibalistic. But again, they're not all the same. Some of them have been here for eons and probably crossbred with the indigenous people and became more and more diluted down into more human life.
Yeah.
It makes them just different.
Ron, I don't even want to get into this discussion, but when, I'm really interested in the Lovelock Cave issue, and those are not Bigfoot. Those are tall humans, right? I mean, Bigfoot don't make decoys and slippers.
Well, no, the Paiutes did that. They took over the cave after they...
Oh, you think that's what it is?
That is what it is.
Ah, okay.
In 1911 is when the Guana miners found the remains of these giants under about 4 or 5 foot of guano when they were mining it out. And it wasn't until 1928 before the Smithsonian got somebody in there to really do a study on it. By then, a lot of the artifacts have been taken out. I got pictures of skulls, and they're not just big humans. That's what BLM says, because I wrote them. The Winnemucca Museum will not show you any of the skulls, neither will the one in Lovelock, the museum there. They all swear, no, they're just robust people. They weren't giants. But according to Paiute legend, and this can be read about in Sarah Winnemucca's book, who wrote about the Paiutes, and they're red-haired giants and 8 foot tall. I mean, big, and they were cannibalistic. So the Paiutes all collectively together from around the whole area drove them into the cave. My question, and there've been 7, 8 foot tall skeletons found in that Humboldt lake bed over there too. I've been to Lovelock Caves 4 times, different reasons for studying this stuff. So it's an interesting story. Sikata is what they call them, Sikata, and they were cannibalistic giants. That's the word, anyway. However, like I say, BLM will deny it. Winnemucca Museum will deny it. They've all been told to deny it because they won't get their funding if they don't march the right road. It's all about money and power.
I do want to say that actually I have heard that the Yeti, at least one race of Yeti, are vegetarian. And another thing I want to say is that giants, real giants, which are, I believe much bigger than 8 foot. I don't consider 8 foot tall a giant, or even 9 foot tall. That's an Anunnaki or another particular alien, but I can say that the giants, coming down through history, were more like 24 feet tall. And they were cannibals, actually. That's in the literature and the information out there. But they were taken out. And the David and Goliath story, by the way, is a metaphor. There was a big battle between the giants and the humans. It is only depicted as one giant and one demon. And I guess, I don't know wherever it's depicted, whether it's Philo or not, I don't know. But wherever that story comes from. And I can tell you that this is from sources that have told me in the background that the giants were cannibalistic. And that's part of the reason they wanted to do away with them.
Okay, we need to get L.A. Marzulli on here because he seems to be the definitive expert. I had Brian on here, and between those elongated skulls, because I'm trying to cover Bigfoot, I'm trying to cover the elongated skulls, I'm trying to cover the Lovelock Caves, and it gives you a headache. I mean, no pun intended, trying to keep track of these people and all of them existing thousands and thousands of years apart. So it's crazy.
Missoula is strictly into the biblical narrative of the Nephilim, which is a crossbreed between fallen angels, quote unquote aliens, and humans, and that was to corrupt the human genome. And there you go. There's a whole biblical story and about that. But that's where I've been with Dele a couple times too, and spoken with him and what have you. But he's a good man, but he's on the trail of the Nephilim. That's his books and that's his DVDs, and he's interesting. But it's straightforward biblical stuff.
Yeah, and well, I would just like to get his physical evidence because he's got those of the soldiers getting that Kandahar giant, and I have a theory that those elongated skulls actually just came out of the Tower of Babel. They went down into Egypt, took over, and they got on boats and sailed over to the Americas. And that's my theory. If anybody wants to hear more, keep listening to the podcast. All right. So you guys, I really appreciate you being on here. I'm sorry about the scheduling mix up. Ron, thank you so much for your patience and sticking with us for 2 hours now. And of course, Kerry, it's always great to see you and have you on our podcast and to be a part of yours. So hello to all the Kerry's listeners and thanks for listening to Ron and I.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Ron, as always, you're welcome to come on the show, and maybe we can go into some more detail that we might have missed here. And thank you, Matthew, for introducing me to Ron. He's obviously got some great stuff, and I'm sure that my audience would be very interested in hearing more. So thank you for providing this interview, Matthew, and it's fun as always to talk to you.
Yeah. It always is. Now, before we finish, can I say my my patented byline, my exit line? If you're out there in the, in the Sierra Camp, in the Sierra Mountains with Ron Morehead, or even over in Sequim, Washington, or if you're with Kerry Cassidy somewhere in California, remember, always watch your back. Thanks for joining us on Encounters USA. Remember, if you have comments, please leave them in the comments section on YouTube and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell while you're at it. Don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on Encounters USA, just send us an email at encountersusa1@gmail.com and just put podcast guest in the subject line. Now, please remember that all of the guests' opinions on Encounters USA are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the podcast host nor the podcast sponsors. So thank you, and don't forget, when you're out in the woods looking for aliens, Bigfoot, or Dogman, always watch your back.